The trigger finger trembles against cold steel. My blood stains the white snow beneath us crimson. 7 men surround the cabin, each one paid handsomely to end our lives before the sun sets. I look into her eyes. 6 months ago, she couldn't even meet my gaze. Now she holds my fate and hers in shaking hands that have learned to kill. Shoot, Grace, I whisper through pain that cuts deeper than the bullet in my thigh, like your father taught you, and she pulls the trigger. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to where this all began, to the day I stopped running from my past and started running towards something I didn't know I needed. My name is Caleb Morgan, 32 years old. I've lived alone on Bitterroot Mountain for 4 years now. People say I'm hiding. They're not wrong. The thing about hiding is you convince yourself you're doing it for good reasons, noble reasons even. You tell yourself the world is better off without you in it, that the people you love are safer when you're gone. You build a cabin at 7,500 feet where the air is thin and the winters kill the weak, and you call it peace. But it's not peace, it's just another kind of prison. The letter arrived with the spring thaw, carried up by old Samuel Hicks, who runs supplies twice a year when the pass is clear. Thick paper sealed with wax, written in the cramped hand of a man who makes his living connecting desperate people. "Found you a woman," it read. "She's practical, strong-willed, arrives on the May coach." I remember standing outside my cabin that morning, watching the sun burn off the last of winter's fog, and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not hope, exactly, more like curiosity. 4 years alone teaches you to live without wanting anything. But it also teaches you that survival and living are 2 very different things. The law says a single woman can't live with a single man in these territories without marriage papers. Moral statutes, they call them, as if morality has anything to do with bureaucracy. But I needed help. The mountain takes everything from you eventually, and I was starting to feel the weight of doing everything alone. So I sent money south with a merchant, gave him specifications. Someone who understands hardship, someone who won't romanticize what life at altitude means, someone who won't expect conversation or companionship or anything beyond the basic exchange of labor for shelter. I should have known better than to trust a middleman. Iron Creek isn't much of a town, 3 buildings if you're generous with the definition. A depot for the stage line, a supply post run by Callahan who knows everyone's business, and a saloon that doubles as everything else the law requires a settlement to have. The rest is tents and temporary structures thrown up by men who are either running from something or looking for something they'll never find. I rode down on a Tuesday in May when the wildflowers were just starting to push through the last patches of snow. The coach was already there when I arrived, sitting in the mud like a tired animal that had traveled too far. Men clustered around the depot, the kind who have nothing better to do than watch other people's lives unfold. I heard the whispers before I saw her. "That's Hale's mail order. Jesus Christ, look at the size of her. She won't make it a week up there. Altitude alone will kill her." I pushed through the crowd, feeling my jaw tighten. I don't like crowds. Haven't since the mine. Too many bodies in too small a space, all of them depending on air that might run out. The coach door opened. A woman stepped down. She was not what I asked for. Not even close. Grace Hartley stood about 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that had given up somewhere around the 2nd day of travel. Her face was round and flushed from the altitude, sweat beading at her temples despite the cool mountain air. She wore a brown coat that had seen better days, straining slightly at the buttons. Her dress beneath it bunched awkwardly at the waist. She was heavy, not just sturdy or thick-boned, but genuinely heavy in a way that made every man in that depot turn and stare and calculate how long she'd last on a mountain that killed stronger people every winter. But that's not what I noticed first. What I noticed were her eyes, dark brown, almost black in the shadow of the coach, and completely, utterly fearless. She scanned the crowd like she was taking inventory. When her gaze landed on me, she didn't look away, Didn't drop her eyes or blush or do any of the things women usually do when they're uncertain. She just looked at me, measuring, deciding. Then she walked straight toward me, each step deliberate despite the thin air that was already making her breathe hard. "Caleb Morgan?" Her voice was steady despite the breathlessness, Eastern accent, educated. "That's me." "Grace Hartley." She didn't offer her hand, just stood there waiting, one hand gripping a leather bag so tightly her knuckles showed white. "You need someone who won't die in 6 months. I need somewhere my former husband can't find me. That's the arrangement." The directness caught me off guard. Most women dance around the truth, especially when they're desperate. But Grace laid it out plain as day, right there in front of God and half of Iron Creek. "You don't waste words," I said. "I'm tired of words that mean nothing." Her eyes never left mine. "You need help on your mountain. I need to disappear. Those are the facts. Everything else is just decoration." I studied her the way I study everything on the mountain, looking for weaknesses, for places where the structure won't hold. Her coat was expensive once, before the journey destroyed it. Her boots were wrong for this terrain, already splitting at the seams from the mud and wet. Everything about her screamed city, comfort, a life lived far from anything resembling hardship. But those eyes had seen things, dark things, the kind that leave marks you can't see but never stop feeling. "You're not what I asked for," I said flatly. "No." She didn't flinch. "I imagine I'm not." "This isn't charity work, Miss Hartley. I need someone who can handle, I know what you need." She cut me off, voice dropping so only I could hear. "You need someone who won't die in 6 months, someone who can work, someone who won't ask questions you don't want to answer." She paused. "That's me. I can learn. I can work. I won't complain, and I won't leave." Something in her voice made me listen harder. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the fine tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing at the road south like she expected someone to come riding up any second. "But if you turn me away right now," she continued, quieter still, "I'm dead within the week. I'm not being dramatic, that's just fact. So you decide. Take me up that mountain or leave me here to freeze in the street." The desperation was real. I could smell it on her like smoke. But underneath that desperation was something harder. Something that reminded me of cornered animals and last stands and people who have already decided they'd rather die fighting than die begging. I glanced past her at the crowd still watching. The merchant who'd arranged this was nowhere in sight, probably 3 towns over already, spending my money. I looked back at Grace, at this woman who was absolutely, completely wrong for mountain life. Every practical bone in my body screamed that this was a mistake. But I've learned something about mistakes in my 4 years alone. Sometimes the biggest mistake is playing it safe. "One condition," I said. She waited. "You don't make it up the mountain, I'm not carrying you. You fall behind, you're on your own. Understood?" "Understood." "And once we're up there, you pull your weight or you leave. No second chances." "Fine." I studied her one more time, looking for hesitation. Found none. "Then get your things. We leave in 10 minutes. Grace had 2 bags. One canvas duffel, worn and patched in multiple places. One leather satchel, locked, which she kept pressed against her side like it contained her soul. I loaded the duffel onto the pack mule without comment. When I reached for the satchel, her hand shot out faster than I expected. "I'll carry that one." I raised an eyebrow. "It's a 6-hour climb. Everything you don't need goes on the mule. I need this." We locked eyes. For a moment I considered pushing. Then I decided it wasn't worth the fight. If she wanted to make the climb harder on herself, that was her choice. "Your funeral," I said. We left Iron Creek behind with the sun already past noon. Too late for a safe climb, but I wasn't about to spend the night in town fielding questions and stares. Better to push hard and make camp halfway. The trail started gentle enough. Packed earth, gradual incline, nothing worse than a bad day's hike. I set a steady pace, the kind that eats up miles without burning you out. The kind I've walked 1,000 times. Behind me, I heard Grace's breathing change within 20 minutes. getting ragged, struggling. I didn't stop, didn't turn around, just kept walking at that same ground-eating pace that had carried me up and down this mountain for 4 years. Behind me, I heard her stumble, heard the sharp intake of breath, heard the mule's hooves shift as she grabbed its harness to steady herself, still didn't stop. This is the first lesson the mountain teaches you. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you're tired or scared or hurting. It just is. And you either adapt or you die. No middle ground. After an hour, the trail got serious. Switchbacks carved into loose shale, the path narrowing to barely 3 feet wide with a cliff dropping away on one side. The air thinned noticeably, each breath delivering less oxygen than the one before. That's when I heard her fall. Not a big fall, just a slip, a gasp. The sound of someone going down hard on their knees. I stopped, turned. Grace was on the ground, one hand braced against the cliff face, the other clutching that damned leather satchel. Her face was white, except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. Sweat soaked through her dress despite the cold. She was shaking. "Get up," I said. She didn't move. "Get up." Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her feet. Her legs trembled. When she took a step, she nearly went down again. I walked back to her, got close enough to see the tears she was fighting to hold back, close enough to see the determination burning underneath the exhaustion. "You want to quit?" I asked. "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then stop feeling sorry for yourself and move." Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or hate. Good. Anger keeps you alive longer than self-pity ever will. She moved. We made camp 3 hours later, well short of my usual halfway point. I didn't comment on it, just set up the small tent, built a fire, and started preparing a sparse meal of dried meat and hardtack. Grace sat on a rock 20 feet away, still clutching the satchel, staring at nothing. She hadn't said a word since the fall. I watched her from the corner of my eye while I worked. She was done. Anyone could see that. Her body had hit its limit, and tomorrow's climb would be twice as hard. She wouldn't make it. But I'd given my word, so tomorrow I'd watch her fail, and then I'd send her back down with the mule. Simple. I finished cooking and brought her a tin plate. "Eat." She took it without looking at me, ate mechanically, forcing down food her stomach probably didn't want. When she finished, she finally spoke. "How much further?" 4 hours. 5 at the pace you're managing. She absorbed that, nodded. "I'll make it." "You won't?" She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw something other than desperation in her face. Determination. Raw, stubborn, probably stupid determination. "Watch me," she said. The next morning started badly. Grace could barely stand. Her legs had stiffened overnight, and when she tried to walk, she moved like someone twice her age, every muscle screaming, her lungs burning with each breath of thin mountain air. I watched her struggle to roll up her bedding, taking 3 times as long as it should. "We can turn back," I said. "No shame in it." "I'm not going back." "Then you better move faster. We've got hard terrain ahead." The morning climb was brutal. The trail turned steep, the switchbacks tighter, the exposure more severe. In places we had to scramble over loose rock with a 1,000-foot drop just inches away. Grace fell twice in the first hour, but she got up both times. No crying, no complaining. Just this grim mechanical persistence that I recognized because I've felt it myself, the kind of determination that comes from having no other choice. I found myself watching her more than the trail, watching the way she forced herself forward despite obvious pain, the way she never asked for rest, never asked for help, just kept grinding forward with mechanical persistence. It was stupid, reckless, completely unsustainable, but it was also something I understood. Around midday, we reached a narrow ledge where the trail curved around a blind corner. The pack mule balked, sensing something wrong. I moved forward to check and found a section of trail completely washed out. Maybe 10 feet of missing path, nothing but a crumbling gap between solid ground. I cursed under my breath. There was a way across. A sketchy scramble over loose rock using handholds carved by water and time. I'd done it before. Not easy, but manageable. For me. I looked back at Grace. She was standing 20 feet behind the mule, leaning against the cliff face, looking half dead. "We've got a problem," I said. She pushed off the wall and walked forward. Looked at the gap. "How do we cross?" "I go first, then I guide the mule across. Then you." "What if I can't make it?" I met her eyes. "Then you don't." She stared at the gap for a long moment, then nodded. I crossed first, moving carefully over the unstable ground. Made it to the far side without incident. The mule was trickier, stubborn, frightened. It fought every step, but eventually I got it across. Then came Grace. She approached the gap slowly, studying the route I'd taken. Her face was pale but focused. "Don't think," I called out. "Just move, steady and smooth." She stepped onto the loose rock. For the first few feet, she did fine. Slow, but stable. Then her foot slipped. She caught herself, fingers digging into stone, but the movement shifted her weight wrong. The rock under her left foot crumbled. She started to slide. I lunged forward, reaching for her, but she was too far. The angle all wrong. And then somehow, she stopped herself. Fingers jammed into a crack, feet finding purchase on stone barely wider than her boot. Body pressed flat against the cliff face. She hung there, breathing hard, eyes wide. "Don't look down," I said. "Look at me, just me." Her eyes found mine. "3 more feet? You can make it." She didn't respond, just started moving again, inch by inch, hand over hand. When she finally reached solid ground, she collapsed to her knees, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. I gave her 30 seconds. "Get up, we're losing light." She got up. We reached the cabin 2 hours before sunset. It sat in a small clearing, backed against a massive stone outcropping that provided shelter from the worst winds. Solid construction. Thick logs, tight chinking. A roof that had survived 3 winters. Smoke pipe jutting from one side. Small windows shuttered against the cold. It wasn't much, but it was home. I opened the door and stepped inside. The interior was cold, dark, smelling of old smoke and wood. One room, maybe 15 feet square, stone fireplace along the back wall, a rough table and 2 chairs, narrow bed in the corner, shelves holding supplies, hooks for hanging tools and clothes. Grace followed me in, still carrying that leather satchel. She looked around without speaking, taking inventory, measuring. "Not what you're used to," I said. "No." "You can have the bed. I'll take the floor until we build you a proper bunk." She turned to look at me, surprise flickering across her face. You don't have to." "I do, actually. You're my wife, legally speaking. That means certain expectations. But I'm not interested in complications, and I'm guessing you aren't either, so we'll keep this practical. You do your work, I'll do mine. We survive the winter. Come spring, if you want to leave, I'll take you back down. If you want to stay, we'll figure it out. Sound reasonable?" She studied me for a long moment. "Reasonable," she agreed. "Good. Then let's get this place warm before we freeze to death." Over the next week, Grace learned what survival actually meant. It meant waking up before dawn to start the fire, because if you didn't, you'd spend the morning too numb to work. It meant hauling water from the spring a 1/4 mile downhill, 2 buckets at a time, until your shoulders screamed. It meant learning to cook over an open fire that behaved nothing like the stove she'd apparently grown up with. It meant chopping wood, which looked simple until you tried it and discovered that every swing took perfect timing, perfect angle, perfect force, or the axe just bounced off and left you gasping. She was terrible at all of it, but she didn't quit. I watched her struggle through those first days with a mixture of frustration and reluctant respect. She had no technique, no efficiency, no natural aptitude for any of this. Everything took her twice as long as it should, but she kept trying. When the axe bounced off a log for the 10th time, she didn't throw it down and cry. She just reset, adjusted her grip, and swung again. When she burned dinner, She scraped the pot clean and started over without comment. When hauling water left her gasping and dizzy, she sat down for exactly 60 seconds, then picked up the buckets and finished the job. It was the most stubborn thing I'd ever witnessed. On the 8th day, she managed to split a log cleanly on the first swing. She stood there staring at the two pieces, breathing hard. Then she picked up another log and did it again. I stood at the cabin door watching and felt something shift in my chest. Maybe she wouldn't die after all. But there were cracks in the facade. Little things that didn't add up. The way she flinched when I moved too quickly. The way she positioned herself in any room so she could see the door. The way she slept, if you could call it sleep. Barely 4 hours a night, waking at the smallest sound. And that leather satchel, she never let it out of her sight. Took it to the spring, kept it beside her when she worked, slept with it under her pillow. One night, 2 weeks after we'd arrived, I came back early from checking traps. The cabin door was open. Inside, Grace sat at the table, the satchel open in front of her. She was counting money, not coins, bills, a lot of them. She looked up, saw me, and went absolutely still. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "That's a lot of cash," I said quietly. Grace's hand moved to something else in the bag, something metal. "Don't," I said. "I'm not going to hurt you, but I need to know what I'm dealing with here." She didn't move. "Who are you running from?" Her jaw tightened. "Grace Hartley isn't your real name, is it?" "It is now." "But it wasn't." Silence. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, kept my hands visible, my posture open. "I don't care who you were," I said, "or what you did, but if someone's going to come looking for you up here, I need to know about it before they show up with guns." Grace stared at me, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she spoke. "My husband's name was Marcus Hartley. The name meant nothing to me. He was a merchant, textile trade, very successful, very connected. And you left him." "I escaped him." The word choice was deliberate. "He hurt you. He owned me." Her voice was flat. "Legally, socially, every way that mattered. And when I stopped being useful as decoration, he found other uses for me." My hands tightened on the table. "So you ran." "I took what he owed me and I left." She gestured at the bills. "That money is 3 years of my dowry that he invested. I stole it back, along with something else." "What else?" She hesitated, then reached into the satchel and pulled out a small leather journal. Records, accounts, proof of business dealings that would ruin him if they came to light. Smuggling, bribery, worse things. He kept it all documented because he never thought anyone would dare use it against him. And you took it. I took it. So he's not just looking for a runaway wife. He's looking for someone who can destroy him. Yes, I sat back processing. This was worse than I thought. Much worse. "How hard is he looking?" "I don't know. I've been moving for months, changed my name twice, paid a forger for papers saying I died in a fire. But if he's determined..." She trailed off. "He'll find you. Eventually." The cabin felt smaller suddenly, more vulnerable. I looked at the woman sitting across from me. Weeks ago I'd thought her weak, soft, unsuited for this life. Now I saw someone who'd stolen from a powerful man, faked her own death, and climbed a mountain she had no business surviving, all to escape. That wasn't weakness. That was stone-cold determination. "Why tell me?" I asked. "Because if they come, you deserve to know why. And because..." She met my eyes. "You've kept your word, treated me fairly when you had no reason to. That's worth honesty." I was quiet for a moment. Then I stood up. "There's a rifle on the top shelf. You know how to shoot?" "No." "Then you're going to learn. If someone comes up this mountain looking for you, I want you able to defend yourself." Grace stared at me. You're not going to send me away?" "You're my wife, legally speaking." I said it the same way I had before. Practical, unemotional. "That means something up here. Someone tries to take you, they'll have to go through me first." "Why would you?" "Because I don't like bullies. And I don't like men who hurt women." My voice was hard. And because you've earned your place here, so we're going to make sure you keep it." For the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. "Tomorrow morning, after chores, shooting lesson." "Okay." I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. That journal, you should hide it somewhere away from the cabin. If they come searching, they won't find it on you." "Where?" "I'll show you a place. Stone cache up the ridge, waterproof. Been using it for years." "All right." I left her there, sitting at the table with her secret spread out in front of her. And for the first time since bringing her up the mountain, I felt like I'd made the right choice. The shooting lessons did not go well. The rifle was too heavy for Grace's arms. The recoil knocked her back every time. Her aim was terrible, her stance worse, and the thin air made her so breathless she could barely hold the gun steady. But she kept trying. Day after day, we went to a small clearing behind the cabin, and I taught her the basics. How to hold the weapon, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. She missed every target for the first week. Then, on the 8th day, she hit a tree trunk 30 feet away. She stared at the splintered bark, disbelief spreading across her face. "Again," I said. She raised the rifle, fired, hit the tree again. Something like pride flashed in her eyes. "Not bad," I said. It was the first compliment I'd given her. She smiled, small, brief, but real. "Now do it 20 more times," I added. The smile disappeared, but she loaded another round. That night, after she'd gone to sleep, I sat by the fire thinking about the past month, about this woman who'd arrived broken and desperate, and somehow started putting herself back together on a mountain that broke stronger people. I thought about the way she'd looked at me when I said I'd protect her, like she couldn't quite believe it, like kindness was a foreign language she'd forgotten how to speak. And I thought about the leather satchel and the journal inside it, and the man who would eventually come looking for both. My hand went to the scar on my forearm, the one I got the day Ethan died, the day I learned that trusting the wrong person gets people killed. I'd sworn then I'd never be responsible for another life, that I'd live alone where my mistakes couldn't hurt anyone but me. But here I was, responsible, protective, starting to care about someone I'd planned to use for labor and nothing more. The mountain wind howled outside, promising snow. Winter was coming early this year, and with it, I suspected, trouble. I looked at Grace, curled on the bed with that satchel tucked under her pillow, and made a decision. If they came for her, they'd find me first, and they'd regret it. That night, Grace woke screaming. I was on my feet before I was fully conscious, hand going to the rifle by reflex. But there was no danger. Just Grace sitting bolt upright in bed, both hands clutching her throat like she was being strangled, eyes wide with terror that wasn't quite awake. A nightmare. Just a nightmare. I stood there, uncertain. I'm not good with this kind of thing. Never have been. You can't fix a nightmare with practical solutions, but I couldn't just stand there either. I poured a cup of water from the bucket and brought it to her. Set it on the small table beside the bed. She blinked. Came back to herself slowly. Saw the water. Reached for it with shaking hands. When she drank, I saw them clearly for the first time. Bruises on her neck just below her jawline. Old bruises, mostly faded, but in the shape of fingers. Someone had choked her, recently, within the last 2 months. She caught me looking, quickly pulled her collar higher. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." A lie, but a kind one. She drank more water. I noticed her hands had stopped shaking as much, like the simple act of drinking something, of having a small kindness offered, had grounded her. "It was just a dream," she said, more to herself than to me. "About him?" She nodded. I sat down on the floor back against the wall, far enough away to not crowd her, close enough that she knew I was there. "You don't have to talk about it," I said, "but if you want to, I'll listen." She was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe she'd fallen back asleep. Then she spoke. "He used to come home at unpredictable hours, wake me up demanding things, food, Attention, other things. Her voice was soft, distant. And if I wasn't immediately available, if I'd locked the bedroom door or wasn't waiting in the right room, she trailed off. I felt my jaw tighten, felt that old familiar anger rising, the kind that got me in trouble back when I still lived among people. "How long were you married?" I asked. 4 years. Married at 19 to a man I'd met twice. My father arranged it. Thought he was doing right by me. Marcus was successful, charming. What father wouldn't want that for his daughter? Except the charm was a mask. It always is, with men like him. She pulled her knees up to her chest. He was attentive before the wedding, sweet even. Then we said our vows, and it was like a mask came off, like he didn't have to pretend anymore. No one helped you? Who would I tell? My father died 6 months after the wedding. My mother was dependent on Marcus for financial support. And everyone else just saw a successful merchant with a respectable wife. If I'd complained, they would have said I was ungrateful, hysterical. She said it without bitterness, just stating facts. "So you started planning," I said. And it took 2 years, gathering money slowly, a little here, a little there. Small enough he wouldn't notice. Finding the journal in his office, making copies of the most damaging pages, hiding them, researching places I could disappear to. And then one night you just left. One night he came home drunk and violent, and I knew if I didn't leave then, I never would. So I paid a maid to spread rumors I'd gone to visit my cousin up north, took a coach east instead, used a fake name, changed my appearance, bought papers from a forger that said Grace Thornhill had died in a boarding house fire. Then I became Grace Hartley and kept moving. Until you answered my ad. Until I answered your ad. She looked at me, which I'm sure you regret. I don't, actually. The word surprised us both. She sat up straighter. You don't? I thought about how to explain it, how to put into words what I'd seen over the past month. You've held up better than I expected, better than some men I've known. I paused. That's not saying much. I've seen how hard this is for you sometimes. But you haven't quit. That counts for something. Where else would I go? Exactly. You're committed, makes you reliable. It wasn't poetry, wasn't even particularly warm. But coming from me, it might as well have been a declaration of devotion. Grace lay back down, pulling the blankets up to her chin. But I saw something in her face that hadn't been there before. Something lighter. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not sending me back. Thank you for saving the mule." That got a small laugh out of her. Soft, brief, but genuine. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the silence between us felt comfortable. I settled back against the wall, meaning to stay awake in case the nightmare returned, but at some point I must have dozed off, because when I woke, it was morning and Grace was already up, making coffee over the fire. She looked tired, but not broken. And I realized something that should have terrified me, but somehow didn't. I didn't want her to leave when spring came. I wanted her to stay. January turned the mountain into a prison of ice and silence. The snow kept coming, 3 feet, then 4, then so much that I had to dig a tunnel just to reach the woodpile. The world outside the cabin became a white void where everything looked the same, where you could walk 10 feet and lose all sense of direction. We were completely cut off now. No way down, no way out. Just the two of them and the slow passage of frozen days. Grace stopped asking when spring would come. Stopped watching the calendar I kept scratched into the wall beside the fireplace. She just worked, ate, slept, and worked again. A rhythm as relentless as the wind that never quite stopped howling. But something was changing between us. Small things, subtle shifts that I noticed the way I notice changes in weather patterns or animal behavior. The kind of details that keep you alive at altitude. I started showing her things without being asked. How to read animal tracks in the snow. How to predict storms by the way the smoke moved from the chimney. How to sharpen a knife properly so the edge lasted. She started sleeping more than 4 hours a night. Still woke sometimes, but not always gasping, not always reaching for her throat. The way we worked developed its own language, I'd reach for something and she'd already be handing it to me. She'd start a task and I'd finish it without discussion. Small efficiencies that only came from paying attention to each other. We didn't talk about it, but it was there. One night in mid-January, I was repairing a snowshoe by the fire when Grace spoke from her bunk. "Can I ask you something?" I glanced up. "Sure." "Why did you come up here, to the mountain?" My hand stilled on the leather I was working. That was a long story, and not one I told often. But we had nothing but time, and Grace had trusted me with her secrets. Seemed only fair to return the favor. I set down the snowshoe and leaned back against the wall. "I had a brother," I said finally. "Younger, Ethan. We worked timber together down in the valley. Good money. Steady work." Grace shifted in her bunk, listening. "Then one winter, the company pushed too hard, wanted us cutting in weather that wasn't safe. Ethan argued with the foreman, man named Dutch Keller, said we should wait until the storm passed." I paused, jaw tight. Keller didn't care. Threatened to fire anyone who refused to work, so Ethan went out, whole crew did. And a widowmaker came down, huge branch, 40 feet long, heavy as hell, caught Ethan across the chest. Grace drew in a breath. "He lived for 3 days, coughing blood, ribs all smashed up, nothing anyone could do except wait." My voice went flat. I was there the whole time, watched him die inch by inch. And the worst part? I'd told him to trust Keller. I'd said the foreman knew what he was doing, that we should listen to him. "That's not your fault." "Feels like it is. I trusted the wrong person, and my brother paid the price." "So you left." "Couldn't stomach working for people who valued profit over human life. Came up here where the only person who could get me killed was me." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it?" "I considered that, really considered it. Some days, it's lonely as hell up here, and there are things I miss. Music, decent food, conversations that aren't just about survival." I picked up the snowshoe again, working the leather. "But at least I can sleep at night. Can't put a price on that." "I understand that," she said softly, "the needing to sleep at night." "Your husband never let you?" "Not without fear." Her voice was quiet. "He'd come home at unpredictable hours, wake me up, demanding things. And if I wasn't immediately available, if I'd locked the door or wasn't in the right room," she trailed off. "You learn to sleep light, always listening, always waiting for footsteps." My hands tightened on the leather. "How long were you married?" 4 years? Married at 19 to a man I'd met twice. My father arranged it. Marcus Hartley, successful textile merchant, charming, wealthy. My father thought he was doing right by me. And Marcus showed his true face after the wedding. They always do." She shifted again. "The first time he hit me was 3 weeks after we married. I'd laughed at something during dinner, too loud apparently. He slapped me across the face so hard, I saw stars. Then he apologized, brought me flowers the next day, said the stress of business had gotten to him. I stopped working the leather, just listened. The second time was a month later. Then it started happening more often. Slaps became shoves, shoves became worse things. But always careful, always where people couldn't see. He had a reputation to maintain. "No one helped you?" Who would I tell? My father died 6 months after the wedding. My mother was dependent on Marcus for financial support, and everyone else just saw a successful merchant with a respectable wife. If I'd complained, they would have said I was ungrateful. She said it without bitterness, just stating facts. "So you started planning your escape." It took 2 years, gathering money slowly, finding that journal in his office. One day I was looking for a contract he'd asked me to find, and I came across a ledger that didn't match his public accounts. When I looked closer, I realized he was keeping 2 sets of books, one for the authorities, one that showed what he was really doing. And you started copying it, every chance I got. Names, dates, transactions, evidence of smuggling, bribery, fraud, things that could destroy him if they came to light. Her voice hardened. I knew someday I'd need leverage, something to keep him from coming after me. But you still ran. One night he came home drunk and violent, and I knew if I didn't leave then, I never would. So I took the money I'd hidden, took the journal, paid a maid to spread rumors I'd gone north, went east instead, bought forged papers saying Grace Thornhill died in a fire, became Grace Hartley, and kept moving until you ended up here. Until I ended up here. She was quiet for a moment. Do you ever think about going back to the valley? Sometimes. But there's nothing for me there anymore. Ethan's gone. The company's still run by the same bastards, and I've gotten used to the quiet. Even though it's lonely? Lonely and peaceful aren't the same thing. But yeah, even though. We fell silent again. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. Thank you, Grace said eventually. For what? For telling me? For trusting me with that? I nodded even though she couldn't see it in the dark, and for the first time in 4 years, talking about Ethan didn't feel like swallowing glass. The next morning brought fresh problems. I went to check the food stores and discovered mice had gotten into one of the grain sacks, chewed through the cloth and scattered flour everywhere. Damn it! I surveyed the damage, calculating how much we'd lost. Too much. We were already rationing carefully, and this just made things tighter. Grace appeared behind me. How bad? Week's worth, maybe more. Can we hunt to make up the difference? In this weather? Maybe, if we get lucky. I pulled out the damaged sack, brushing away mouse droppings. We'll need to set more traps, move the grain to sealed containers. I'll handle the containers if you handle the traps. I nodded. We split up to work. An hour later, while I was checking trap lines near the ridge, I heard something that made me freeze. Voices. Distant, carried on the wind, but definitely voices. Nobody should be up here, not in winter, not in weather like this, unless they were looking for something or someone. I dropped into a crouch, every sense sharpening. Moved carefully back toward the cabin, staying low, using the trees for cover. The voices got clearer as I approached. 2 men, maybe 3, coming from the south trail. They were still a ways off, but they were definitely heading toward my cabin. I slipped inside and found Grace organizing the grain containers. We've got company, I said quietly. Her head snapped up, fear flooding her eyes. How many? At least 2, coming up the south trail. It's them. Her voice shook. It has to be. We don't know that yet. Who else would come up here in winter? Fair point. I moved to the window, scanning the tree line. Could be trappers, could be lost miners. Please don't. Eliza stood, gripping the table. Don't tell me it's probably nothing, not when we both know better. I looked at her, saw the terror she was fighting to control. Get the rifle, I said, and the revolver from the lockbox. Load them both. What are you going to do? Go meet them, see what they want. Caleb, if it's trouble, better they meet me first. Gives you time to decide what to do. What do you mean, decide? I turned to face her fully. There's a root cellar under the back corner. Hidden door under the rug. If things go bad, you get down there and you don't come out until you're sure they're gone. Understand? I'm not hiding while you... Yes, you are. My voice was hard. Because if they're here for you and they get through me, you being armed and ready is our only backup plan. This isn't about bravery. It's about survival. So do what I'm telling you. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Be careful. Always am. I grabbed my rifle and stepped outside into the cold. The voices were closer now. I could hear boots crunching in snow, the occasional curse as someone slipped on ice. I positioned myself in the clearing, rifle held casually but ready, and waited. 2 men emerged from the trees, both bundled in heavy coats, faces wrapped against the cold. One was tall and lean, moving with the easy confidence of someone used to rough country. The other was shorter, stockier, with a pronounced limp. They stopped when they saw me. "Morning," the tall one called out. His voice was friendly, but his hand stayed near his belt. "Morning," I replied. "You boys lost?" "Not exactly," he smiled. "Looking for someone, actually." "Who?" "Man named Caleb Morgan. Lives up here somewhere." "You found him." The tall man's smile widened. "Good. Saves us some trouble." He gestured to his companion. "Name's Owen Cooper. This is my brother Lyle. We're working for a gentleman down in the territories. He's looking for his wife. Is that right? Yes, sir. Woman named Grace. Went missing about 6 months back. We've been tracking her movements, coaches, hotels, that sort of thing. Trail led us to a town called Iron Creek, and some folks there said you might have brought a woman up here back in autumn. I kept my face neutral. I did. Mail-order wife. Legal arrangement. I'm sure it was. Owen's tone stayed pleasant. But see, the thing is, we've got reason to believe the woman you brought up might be the same woman our employer's looking for. And if that's the case, well, he'd pay handsomely to get her back. We're talking serious money, Mr. Morgan, enough to set you up real comfortable. What makes you think my wife is your missing woman? Description matches. Age, appearance, timing. Owen's smile widened. And our employer mentioned she might have been using the name Hartley. He let that hang in the air. That ring any bells? I considered my options. I could lie, say Grace had died or left or never existed, but these men hadn't come all the way up here on a hunch. They had information, and lies would just make them suspicious. Even if she is this woman you're looking for, I said slowly, she's my wife now. Legal marriage, properly registered. That means she's not going anywhere unless she chooses to. Oh, we're not suggesting force, Mr. Morgan. Owen held up his hands. Just a conversation. Let us talk to her. Let her know her husband's worried sick, wants her home safe. If she wants to stay here, that's her choice. But doesn't she deserve to hear him out? She's not interested. You asked her? Didn't have to. Owen's smile faded slightly. See, now that concerns me. Makes me wonder if you're keeping her here against her will. Maybe you saw a vulnerable woman and took advantage. Maybe she'd leave if she thought she could. She can leave any time she wants. Then let us talk to her. What's the harm? The harm was that these men were lying through their teeth, and I knew it. No husband sent hired men into the mountains in the middle of winter just to have a conversation. You did that when you wanted something back and didn't care how you got it. I'll give her your message, I said. If she wants to talk to you, she can come out. If not, you boys can head back down. That's not really going to work for us. Then we've got a problem. Lyle, who'd been silent until now, shifted. I caught the glint of metal under his coat. They were armed. Of course they were. Look, Owen said, voice hardening. We've come a long way. Climbed a mountain in the middle of winter. Lost one of our guys to a fall 3 days back. So we're not leaving without at least seeing the woman. You can make this easy or you can make it hard. Your choice. I tightened my grip on the rifle. Easy or hard, I said quietly. You're not getting past me. The two men exchanged glances. Then Owen sighed. Shame. We were hoping to keep this civilized. His hand moved toward his belt. My rifle came up faster. Don't! Owen froze. For a long moment nobody moved. 3 men in the snow, weapons half drawn, measuring each other. Then a voice cut through the tension. Stop! All 3 of us turned. Grace stood in the cabin doorway, rifle in her hands. Grace, I started. It's fine. She walked forward, movement steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. I know why they're here. Owen's expression shifted to something uglier. Mrs. Hartley, your husband's been very worried. I'm sure he has. Her voice was ice. Missing property tends to be concerning. Now that's not fair. The man loves you. The man owns me. There's a difference. She stopped beside me, rifle still raised. And whatever he's paying you, it's not enough. Lyle spoke for the first time, his voice rough. He's paying plenty, and he wants you back, so you can come peaceful or we can make it difficult. I'm not going anywhere. Not your choice anymore. Actually, I said, it is. She's my wife. You want to take her, you go through the law, file a claim, prove your case, but you don't get to just drag her off my property. Owen laughed. Your property? Friend, we're in the middle of nowhere. There is no law up here, just who's stronger. Exactly. My voice dropped. And I know this mountain. Every trail, every cliff, every place a body could disappear and not be found until spring. You really want to test who's stronger on my ground? The threat hung in the cold air. Lyle's hand moved toward his gun. Don't, Grace said. Her rifle swung toward him. I know how to use this now, and I will. She's bluffing, Owen said. Try me. Something in her voice made both men hesitate. This wasn't the soft city woman they'd expected. This was someone who'd survived months on a mountain that killed experienced men. Someone who'd already decided she'd rather die than go back. Owen recalculated. $20,000, he said. That's what Hartley's offering. We split it 3 ways. You, me, Lyle. All you have to do is walk away. Let us take her, and you're a rich man. Not interested. 30,000, and we forget you ever had anything to do with this. Still no. 50. I didn't even blink. She stays. Owen's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. The 2 hired men stood there weighing their options. They were armed, experienced, probably dangerous. But they were also tired from the climb, unfamiliar with the terrain, and facing 2 people who had home advantage and nothing left to lose. Finally, Owen stepped back. We'll be going then, but this isn't over. Hartley's not the type to give up. But tell him she's dead, I said. Tell him the climb was too much and she died of exposure. Give him closure. Take whatever money he's already paid you and move on with your lives. He'll want proof. Then get creative. But if you come back up this mountain looking for her, I promise you won't make it down again. It wasn't a bluff. Owen must have seen that because he nodded slowly. We'll relay your message, but don't say we didn't warn you. The 2 men turned and started back toward the trail. Grace and I stood in the snow, watching them disappear into the trees. Neither of us lowered our weapons until the voices faded completely. Then Grace's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, rifle falling from her hands, her whole body shaking. I knelt beside her. You all right? I thought when I heard voices, I thought it was over. Not over, not even close. I helped her stand. They're going to tell Marcus you're alive, which means more will come, probably in spring when the trail's passable. I know. We need to be ready. I know. I studied her face. You sure you want to stay? Because we could run, pack up, head west, lose ourselves in different territory. I'm tired of running. Then we dig in, make this place defensible, stock weapons, supplies, set up early warning systems. My voice was grim. Turn this cabin into a fortress. Then you'd do that? Risk everything for someone you barely know? I know you well enough. I picked up her rifle and handed it back to her. And I meant what I said. You're my wife. That means something. Grace looked at me, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. Thank you, she said softly. Don't thank me yet. We've got a lot of work to do. We went back inside and I started making plans. The rest of January and all of February passed in a blur of preparation. I taught Grace everything I knew about combat and defense, not just shooting, though we practiced that daily until her aim was reliably accurate at 50 yards. But hand-to-hand fighting, knife work. How to use the environment as a weapon. I showed her pressure points, weak spots in the human body, ways a smaller person could take down someone bigger. She learned fast, faster than I expected. Turned out all those months of heavy work had built real strength in her arms and core. And her body weight, which she'd always seen as a liability, actually gave her advantages in close combat. Lower center of gravity, more mass behind her strikes, harder to knock off balance. Stop thinking of it as something wrong with you, I said one day, after she'd successfully thrown me during grappling practice. It's just how you're built. Use it. She sat there in the snow, breathing hard, looking at me with something like revelation. I've spent my whole life being told I was too big, too heavy, that I needed to fix myself. Too big for what? Someone else's idea of perfect? I stood up, brushing off snow. Up here, survival isn't about looking a certain way. It's about being functional. And you're functional as hell. Something in her face changed, softened. You really believe that? I don't say things I don't believe, she smiled. Genuine, warm. The kind of smile that transformed her whole face. I felt something catch in my chest. Dangerous, a voice in my head warned. You're getting attached. Too late, I realized. Way too late. We also fortified the cabin. I cut firing slits in the walls, narrow openings that allowed us to shoot out but made it hard for attackers to shoot in. Reinforced the door with extra planking and heavy crossbars. Built shutters for the windows that could be barred from inside. I set up a bell system on the trails. Thin wires strung at ankle height, connected to bells hung inside the cabin. Anyone approaching would trigger them before getting close. And I cached supplies in multiple locations around the property. Weapons, ammunition, food, medical supplies. If we had to abandon the cabin, we'd have fallback positions. Grace helped with all of it. Learning the defensive layout, practicing movement between positions, memorizing sight lines and firing angles. "You're turning me into a soldier," she said one evening. "I'm turning you into someone who survives." Is there a difference? Soldiers follow orders. Survivors make their own decisions. I checked the action on one of the rifles. When trouble comes, and it will come, you're going to have to make choices, hard ones. I can teach you skills, but I can't tell you when to run and when to fight. That's on you. What would you do? Me? I'd fight, but I'm stubborn and probably stupid. I set the rifle aside. You've got something to live for besides pride. That journal, the evidence you took, that could actually stop Marcus. So if it comes down to dying here or running with that information, you run, you hear me? I'm not leaving you. Grace. I'm not. Her voice was firm. I've run before. I know how it feels, and I'm done with it. If they come, we face them together. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being foolish. That survival mattered more than loyalty. But the look in her eyes stopped me. She'd made her choice, and I'd respect it. Together then, I said. She nodded, and I realized I'd somehow gone from wanting to send her away at first opportunity to being willing to die defending her. Probably stupid, that voice said again. Definitely stupid, I agreed, but I wasn't changing my mind. March came with false promises of spring. The snow started melting during the day, turning everything into slush and mud, but it still froze hard at night, creating treacherous ice. The trail down was almost passable, which meant trouble could come up. I started sleeping lighter, one ear always tuned for the warning bells. Grace did the same, both of us caught in a strange state of waiting for violence we knew was coming but couldn't predict. The tension wore on us. Small arguments flared up. Disagreements about supplies, about security protocols, about nothing at all really, just pressure finding release. One night, after a particularly sharp exchange about whether we needed to set traps along the north approach, Grace threw down the rope she was working with. "This is insane. We're living like we're under siege." "We are under siege. They're just waiting for better weather." "Maybe they're not coming. Maybe Cooper convinced Marcus I'm dead." "You believe that?" "No." She slumped against the wall. "But I'm tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of being afraid. Tired of every sound making me jump." I sat down beside her. "I know." "Do you?" "Because you seem fine. Calm. Like this is just another day. I'm good at hiding it." I was quiet for a moment. After Ethan died, I spent a year jumping at every sound, seeing him in every shadow, waiting for something else terrible to happen. Eventually, I realized the waiting was worse than whatever I was waiting for. So I learned to live with it, accept it as background noise. How? Focused on things I could control, built this cabin, learned the mountain, made a life that was mine, not dependent on anyone else's decisions. I looked at her. You're doing the same thing, learning to fight, learning the terrain, taking control. It just takes time. We might not have time. Then we make the most of what we've got. She turned to look at me. Than me, and I realized how close we were sitting. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath in the cold air. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Grace leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was deliberate, fierce, a declaration. I froze for half a second, then kissed her back. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grace's eyes were wide. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. But we agreed. Practical arrangement. No complications. Seems like we already passed complicated. I touched her face gently. And for what it's worth, I'm not Ethan. You're not Marcus. We get to decide what this is. What do you want it to be? Honest question deserved an honest answer. Real, I said. I want it to be real. She kissed me again, softer this time. And when she pulled back, she was smiling. Real sounds good. We didn't talk about it after that. Didn't make grand declarations or plan a future we might not have. We just shifted. Small changes. Grace moved her bedding closer to mine. We started touching more. Hands brushing while working. Shoulders pressed together by the fire. Started sharing the small intimacies that came with actually trusting someone. It felt natural, right, and terrifying. Because now I had even more to lose, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Mid-March brought the first warm day, actual warmth. Sun breaking through clouds, snow melting fast. I decided to ride down to Iron Creek, check for news, see if anyone had been asking questions, maybe learn what Marcus's men had reported. I don't like this, Grace said, watching me saddle the mule. I'll be fine, down and back before dark. What if they're waiting? Then I'll see them before they see me. I checked my rifle, but I need to know what we're dealing with. Information's the only advantage we've got. She didn't argue further, just kissed me hard and told me to be careful. The ride down was tense. Every shadow could hide an ambush. Every sound could be footsteps. But I made it to Iron Creek without incident. The town was busier than I'd seen it in months. Early miners arriving. Trappers coming out of the high country. Traders restocking before heading further west. I went straight to the trading post where Callahan ran both the store and the town's informal information network. Morgan. Callahan nodded, greeting. Heard you got yourself a wife. News travels. I do. Also heard some men came through looking for her a couple weeks back. My attention sharpened. What'd they say? Asked around. Wanted to know if anyone had seen a woman matching her description. I told them she'd been here but moved on. Figured that was safest. They believe you? Hard to say. They left heading south, but Callahan lowered his voice. Word is they're coming back. With reinforcements, waiting for the pass to fully clear, then they're mounting a proper expedition. How many? Don't know for sure, but more than 2. My jaw tightened. When? Week. Maybe 2. Not enough time. Not nearly enough. Thanks for the warning. Morgan. Callahan's expression was serious. Whatever trouble that woman's in, is it worth dying over? Yes. You're sure? I'm sure. Callahan studied me, then nodded. Then you better get ready. Because trouble's coming, and it's bringing friends. I bought ammunition, medical supplies, some extra food. Then I headed back up the mountain, pushing the mule faster than was safe. I needed to tell Grace we were out of time. Grace was waiting in the clearing when I crested the final ridge. She had the rifle slung across her back, and relief flooded her face when she saw me. You're late, she said. Got held up talking to Callahan. I dismounted, started unloading supplies. We need to talk. Her expression shifted. How bad? Bad, they're coming back. Bigger group this time. Week or 2 at most. She went very still. How many? He didn't know, but enough that they feel confident about taking us. Grace turned away, staring out at the valley below. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and red. Beautiful and completely indifferent to our problems. We could still run, I said quietly. Right now. Take what we can carry and disappear west. They'd never find us. You don't want to run. No, but I'd do it for you. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I spent 4 years being afraid. 4 years letting Marcus control every aspect of my life. And when I finally escaped, I swore I'd never live like that again. Never let fear make my decisions. This isn't about fear. It's about staying alive. It's about both. She turned to face me. If we run now, we'll always be running. There'll always be another threat, another reason to keep moving. And I'm done with that. I want a life, Caleb, a real one. And I can't have that until Marcus is stopped. I understood what she was saying, understood it, and hated it. So we make our stand here. We make our stand here. I moved closer, took her hands. They were rough now, calloused from months of work. Strong hands. Then we better make sure we win. She squeezed my fingers. What do we need to do? Everything we've been planning, but faster. We worked through the night and into the next day, turning the cabin into something resembling a fortress. I reinforced the firing slits, added a second layer of barricading to the door, built covered positions outside where we could fall back if the cabin became untenable. Grace organized our ammunition, creating caches at each defensive position. She also prepared medical supplies, knowing wounds were likely. And she wrote down everything she knew about Marcus's operation, names, dates, transactions. Sealed it in a waterproof pouch that she hid in the stone cache up the ridge. If I don't make it, she told me, that information gets sent to the territorial marshal. Promise me. You're going to make it. Promise me anyway. I promise. We both knew the odds weren't good. Even with preparation, even with the advantage of familiar terrain, we were 2 against an unknown number of armed men who were being paid well enough to risk a mountain assault. But neither of us said it out loud. The days that followed were strange, waiting for violence while trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. We still cooked meals together, still talked by the fire, still held each other at night. But underneath everything was a current of tension that never quite went away. I caught myself memorizing small details about Grace, the way she tucked hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the slight frown of concentration when she aimed the rifle, the warmth in her eyes when she looked at me. I was storing them up, just in case. 1 week passed, then 10 days. On the 11th day, the warning bells rang. It was mid-afternoon, sun high and bright. I was outside checking the perimeter when I heard the first faint jingle. I froze, listened. Another bell. North trail, then a third. East approach. Multiple directions. Coordinated. "Grace," I shouted, already running for the cabin. "They're here!" She appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand, face pale, but determined. "How many trails?" "At least 2, maybe 3. I grabbed my own rifle, checked the load. "They're trying to surround us. What do we do?" "Get inside, bar the door. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target." My mind was racing, running through scenarios. "And if they breach?" "I know, root cellar." "No," I grabbed her arm. "If they breach, you run. North side has the least coverage. You might make it to the trees." "I'm not leaving you." "Grace." "No." Her voice was iron. "We do this together or not at all." There wasn't time to argue. The first man emerged from the tree line to the south, then another, then 3 more. I counted quickly. 7 visible. Could be more in the trees. Bad odds, really bad. "Inside," I said, "but now!" We barricaded ourselves in the cabin, taking positions at opposite firing slits. I watched the men spread out, professional and careful. These weren't the same 2 from before. These were experienced. Probably ex-military or professional enforcers. Marcus had spent real money on this. One of the men stepped forward, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Caleb Morgan," he called out. "My name is Vincent Shaw. I'm here on behalf of Marcus Hartley. We don't want any trouble. Just give us the woman and we'll leave peacefully." "She's not going anywhere," I shouted back. "Mr. Morgan, please be reasonable. We have you surrounded. There's no way out. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You're on my property. You're the ones making it hard." Shaw sighed, like this was all very tedious. "We're prepared to offer you $50,000 cash. All you have to do is walk away, leave the woman, take the money, and this all ends." "Not interested." "75,000, final offer." "Still no." "Then I'm afraid you're choosing the difficult path." Shaw stepped back, his tone hardening. "You've got 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we come in, and we won't be gentle." The men retreated to the tree line, establishing positions. I turned to find Grace staring at me. 75,000, she said quietly. That's a fortune." I know. You could have a new life. Leave the mountain. Live somewhere comfortable. I like the mountain. Caleb. You're worth more than money, Grace. A lot more. I moved to her, cupped her face. And I'm not letting them take you, not for any amount. She kissed me hard. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. I love you, she said. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you. My throat tightened. I love you too. We held each other for a moment, knowing it might be the last time. Then we got back to our positions and waited. The hour passed slowly. I used the time to study the attackers' positions, looking for weaknesses. There were 6 men visible now. The 7th must be circling around or held in reserve. Professional setup. Overlapping fields of fire. No obvious gaps. This was going to get ugly. When the hour was up, Shaw called out one more time. Last chance, Morgan. Go to hell. So be it. Shaw made a signal, and all hell broke loose. The first volley of gunfire shattered the afternoon quiet. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, splintering wood, ricocheting off stone. I ducked instinctively, then returned fire through my slit. One of the attackers dropped, 6 left. Beside me, Grace fired, missed. Fired again. This time a man cried out and stumbled back into cover. Good, I said. Keep them pinned. The exchange of gunfire went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both sides shooting, reloading, shooting again. The cabin filled with smoke from gunpowder and wood dust. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps on the roof. I looked up just as an axe blade punched through the wood, sending splinters raining down. "They're coming through the top," I shouted. Grace swung her rifle up, fired through the ceiling. The axe blade withdrew, followed by a scream and the heavy thud of a body rolling off the roof. 5 left, but now the attackers knew they could breach from above. 2 of them started climbing, while the others provided covering fire. I made a split-second decision. We can't hold this position. We need to fall back. To where? The outcropping. Better defensive position, and they can't get above us. They'll burn the cabin. Let them. We stay here, we die here. Grace hesitated only a second, then nodded. I grabbed our supply packs, already prepared for this exact scenario, and threw one to Grace. On 3, we go out the back window. Run for the rocks. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand? Understood. 1, 2, 3. We burst through the back shutter in a spray of broken wood. I fired twice to scatter the men on that side. Then we were running. Boots pounding through melting snow, bullets kicking up dirt around us. Grace stumbled once but caught herself, kept running. We made it to the rock outcropping and scrambled up into a natural fortress of stone. From here we had elevation, cover, and clear sight lines in 3 directions. Much better. Below us, the attackers regrouped. I counted 4 visible now, 1 dead on the roof, 1 wounded earlier, 1 I dropped in the first volley. But that meant at least 1 was unaccounted for. Shaw stepped into view, using a tree for cover. "You're just making this take longer, Morgan. We can do this all day. Can you?" Shaw gestured, and one of his men produced a torch. "Because we're about to burn everything you own." My jaw clenched as I watched them set fire to the cabin. Flames caught quickly on the dry wood, spreading fast. Within minutes, the structure I'd spent 3 years building was engulfed. Everything I owned, everything I'd worked for, gone. Grace's hand found mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not your fault." "It is. They're here because of me. They're here because of him." My voice was hard. "And we're going to make sure they regret it." The fire drew the attackers' attention, which gave me an opportunity. I sighted carefully and dropped another man who'd gotten too confident. 3 left, maybe 2 if the wounded one from earlier was out of the fight. Better odds. Still not good, but better. Then I heard rocks shifting behind us. I spun just as the 7th man, the one I'd lost track of, came over the top of the outcropping, knife in hand. The man lunged. I barely got my rifle up in time to block the blade. We grappled, rolling across stone, both fighting for position. The knife came down toward my throat. I caught the man's wrist, muscles straining, but my opponent was younger, heavier, leveraging his weight. The blade inched closer. Then a gunshot cracked, deafening at close range. The man jerked, eyes going wide. Blood bloomed across his chest. He toppled sideways. Grace stood 3 feet away, revolver smoking in her hand, face white but steady. She'd just killed a man, her first. "You okay?" I gasped, pushing the body off me. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She pointed down the slope. "They're coming." Shaw and 2 others were advancing up the rocks, using cover, moving fast. I grabbed my rifle, but before I could aim, pain exploded in my thigh. I went down hard, blood spreading across my pants leg. I'd been shot. Didn't even hear it over the noise. "Caleb!" Grace dropped beside me. "I'm fine. Just a graze." It wasn't. The bullet had gone clean through, and I was bleeding heavy, but we didn't have time for panic. "You need to hold them off," I said through gritted teeth. "You need a tourniquet." "Later. Right now you shoot anyone who comes over that ridge." "Can you do that?" She looked at me, looked at the rifle, looked down at Shaw's advancing men. Then something changed in her face. The fear burned away, leaving something harder. "I can do that." She took position at the edge, rifle braced against stone, and started firing. Her first shot missed. Second clipped a rock near Shaw's head, making him duck. Third caught one of his men in the shoulder. The advance faltered. I used my belt to tie off my leg, gritting my teeth against the pain. The bleeding slowed, but didn't stop. I was going to need real medical attention soon, or I'd pass out from blood loss. But first, we had to survive. Shaw and his remaining men had found good cover and were pinning us down with sustained fire. Bullets sparked off the rocks around us. Grace kept firing back, but she was running low on ammunition. We were stuck, couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. Slowly running out of options. Then I had an idea. Stupid, dangerous, probably suicidal. But it might work. "Grace," I said, "I need you to trust me." She glanced back. "What are you thinking? See that ledge above them?" I pointed to an overhang about 30 feet upslope. "If I can get up there, I can trigger a slide. Bury them." "You can barely walk." "I can climb." "Caleb, it's our only play. We stay here. We die slow. This gives us a chance." She stared at me, clearly wanting to argue. Then she looked at my leg, at our dwindling ammunition, at the men below who wouldn't stop until they'd won. "How long do you need?" 5 minutes, maybe less." "Then I'll buy you 5 minutes." She turned back to her position. "Go." I started climbing. Every movement was agony. My legs screamed protest, blood soaking through the makeshift tourniquet, but I kept going, using my arms to pull myself up when my leg wouldn't hold weight. Below, Grace kept up steady fire. Not trying to hit anything, just keeping Shaw's attention down the slope instead of up. I made it to the ledge, breathing hard, vision swimming. The rock here was loose, barely held in place by frozen soil. Perfect. I wedged my rifle into a crack and started prying. One stone came loose, then another. Then a whole section shifted. "Grace!" I shouted. "Get down!" She threw herself flat. I gave one final push, and the ledge gave way. Tons of rock and snow came down in a roaring avalanche, sweeping down the slope directly toward Shaw's position. Shaw saw it coming, tried to run, didn't make it. The slide caught him and his last man, burying them under rock and debris. Then silence. I lay on the ledge, breathing hard, everything hurting. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. "Caleb?" Grace's voice, distant. "Caleb, answer me." "I'm here," I called back weakly. She appeared beside me, moments later, face streaked with dirt and tears. "You're insane," she said. "It worked, though. You're also bleeding everywhere." "Yeah, that's a problem." My vision was going gray at the edges, shock setting in. Grace got her arms under me. "Come on. We need to get you down and stop this bleeding. The cabin's gone." "I know. We'll figure something out." She half carried, half dragged me down to flatter ground, found a spot sheltered from wind, and got me lying flat. Then she cut away my pant leg and really saw the wound. Her face went pale. "This is bad." "I noticed. The bullet went through, but it hit something. Maybe the artery. You're losing too much blood. So fix it. I'm not a doctor, Caleb. You're what I've got." She stared at me for a moment. Then her jaw set, and she got to work. She cleaned the wound with snow, agonizing, then packed it with cloth torn from her own shirt. Applied pressure until the bleeding slowed to a seep, bound it tight with strips of leather from our supply pack. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't professional, but it might keep me alive. "We need to get you warm," she said. "The cabin's still burning, but maybe there's something we can salvage." "Don't. Too dangerous. Fire could collapse any minute." "Then what?" "The cache. Up the ridge. There's blankets, supplies, everything we need. You can't make the climb. You'll have to go alone." She looked torn, scared. "Eliza, I trust you. You can do this." Finally she nodded. "1 hour. If I'm not back, you will be." She kissed me, hard and desperate. Then she was gone, moving up the ridge toward the hidden cache. I lay there, staring at the sky, trying to stay conscious. Everything hurt. My leg throbbed with each heartbeat. My head felt light, disconnected. But we'd survived. Against 7 armed men, against impossible odds, we'd survived. When I opened my eyes again, Grace was back, arms loaded with supplies. She'd made the climb in 40 minutes. "Told you," I mumbled. "Shut up and let me work." She built a shelter using blankets and broken branches, got a small fire going, changed my bandages with proper cloth and what little medicine we had in the cache. By the time she finished, night had fallen and my fever was spiking. Infection. Already. Grace sat beside me, holding my hand, watching my face. "Don't you dare die on me," she whispered. "Not after everything. Not planning on it. Good. Because I need you." Her voice broke. "I need you, Caleb." I squeezed her hand weakly. "I'm right here. Stay right here. Please." "Okay." The night was long and brutal. I drifted in and out of consciousness, fever dreams mixing with reality. Sometimes I thought I was back in the valley with Ethan. Sometimes I thought the cabin was still standing. Sometimes I knew exactly where I was and how bad things were. Grace stayed with me through all of it, changing bandages, forcing water between my lips, keeping me warm, refusing to let me slip away. By morning, the fever broke. I opened my eyes to find pale sunlight filtering through the makeshift shelter and Grace asleep beside me, still holding my hand. She looked exhausted, dirt-streaked, blood-stained, dark circles under her eyes. Beautiful. I managed to sit up, gritting my teeth against the pain. My movement woke her. She jerked upright, eyes wild for a moment before focusing on me. "You're awake." "Seems like." "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot and then triggered a landslide. So, not great." A laugh burst out of her, half relieved, half hysterical. "You're making jokes. That's a good sign." "What's the situation?" Her expression sobered. "The cabin's completely gone. Burned to the foundation. Most of our supplies with it. We've got what was in the cache, and that's it." "The bodies?" "Still under the rockslide as far as I can tell. I haven't checked closely." "Don't. Leave them buried." She nodded. I looked at my leg. The bandage was bloody but not soaked through. Better than last night. "Can I walk?" "Not far, not yet. Then we wait. Give me a few days to heal up, then we figure out next steps." "What next steps? Everything's gone." "Not everything." I met her eyes. "We're alive. That's what matters." She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned in and rested her forehead against mine. "I killed someone last night," she said softly. "I know. I keep seeing his face, the way he looked when the bullet hit. That doesn't go away, not completely." My voice was gentle. "But you did what you had to do. He would have killed me, probably both of us. I know, I never thought I'd be someone who could do that. You're someone who survives, whatever that takes." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What now?" "Now we rest. Then we rebuild." "Rebuild what? The cabin?" "If we stay, yeah. Or we could go somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't have bodies buried in the yard. I paused. It's your choice, Grace. This is your mountain now, too. She looked out at the clearing where the cabin had stood, at the burned timbers and ash, at the ridge beyond where the cache held evidence that could destroy Marcus Hartley. I want to stay, she said finally. This place, for all the violence, for all the fear, it's the first place I've ever felt free, really free. I don't want to give that up. Then we stay. And we finish this. Send that journal to the marshal. Make sure Marcus can never hurt anyone again. When? When you can travel, not before. She touched my face. I need you alive more than I need him dead. I caught her hand, held it. We'll do both, I promise. For 3 days, Grace kept me alive through sheer force of will. The wound festered despite her best efforts. Fever came and went in waves, leaving me shaking and delirious. Sometimes I knew where I was. Sometimes I called for Ethan. Sometimes I stared at her without recognition, eyes glassy and distant. She changed my bandages every few hours, cleaning the wound with boiled water and the limited medicine from the cache. She forced me to drink even when I fought her. She kept me warm when chills racked my body and cooled me with snow when the fever spiked too high. And she didn't sleep, couldn't, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw me dying. On the 4th day, the fever finally broke for good. I woke with my mind clear, though my body felt like it had been trampled by the mule. Grace was slumped beside me, finally unconscious from exhaustion. Dark circles under her eyes, so deep they looked like bruises. Hands raw from work, blood still under her fingernails from changing my bandages. I watched her sleep and felt something crack open in my chest. This woman, the one people had written off as too soft, too weak, too unsuited for this life, had just spent 4 days keeping me from dying, had nursed me through infection and fever in a makeshift shelter with almost no supplies, had refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier. She'd saved my life. Again. When she woke an hour later, the first thing she did was reach for my forehead, checking for fever. It's gone, I said quietly. Her hand stilled. Then she sagged with relief so profound it looked like pain. Thank God. Thank you, I caught her hand. You did this. You kept me alive. I couldn't lose you, her voice broke. Not after everything. I couldn't. I pulled her down beside me, ignoring the protest from my leg, held her while she shook with delayed reaction to 4 days of barely controlled terror. I'm okay, I murmured. I'm right here. You better stay here. Planning on it, we lay there for a while, just breathing, just being alive. Finally, Grace pulled back, wiping her eyes. We need to talk about what happens next. I know. You can't stay here, not like this. She gestured at the makeshift shelter. You need a real doctor, proper medicine, time to heal somewhere that isn't a pile of blankets on frozen ground. We go to Iron Creek. And then what? Just wait for Marcus to send more men? No, then we finish this. My voice was firm despite the exhaustion. We go to the territorial marshal, give them the journal, your testimony, everything. And we make sure Marcus Hartley never hurts anyone again. Grace was quiet, studying me. You're sure? Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. He'll know I'm alive. He'll know where to find me. He already knows that. Shaw told him before he came up here. Had to, or how else would he have gotten men and money for an assault? She absorbed that. So the secret's out. Only question now is whether we use it or run from it. And you think we should use it. I think you deserve justice, real justice, not just survival. I squeezed her hand. And I think that journal is the only way you get it. She reached into her coat and pulled out the small leather-bound book. She'd been carrying it since the attack, unwilling to leave it even in the cache. Everything's in here, she said softly. Every illegal deal, every bribe, every person he destroyed to build his empire. If this gets into the right hands, it'll destroy him. Or get us killed trying. Maybe. She looked at me. But I'd rather die fighting than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I nodded. Then we fight. We waited 2 more days before attempting the trip down. I needed every hour to build back enough strength to manage the descent, and even then it wasn't going to be easy. Grace fashioned a crude crutch from a broken branch, binding it with leather straps. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked well enough for me to hobble around the campsite. "Think you can make it to Iron Creek?" she asked, watching me practice. "I've climbed this mountain with worse injuries." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." I took a few more steps, testing my weight. The leg held, barely. "We go slow. We'll be fine." Define slow. 2 days instead of 6 hours. She winced. "That's not ideal. But it's what we've got." We left at dawn, taking only what we could carry. The cache still held some supplies, and Grace marked its location carefully. We'd need to come back for the rest once I healed. The descent was brutal. Every step sent pain shooting through my leg. The crutch helped, but the trail was still treacherous with ice and loose rock, and there were places where I had to put full weight on the injured leg or risk falling. Grace stayed close, ready to catch me if I stumbled. Twice I did stumble, and both times she was there, bracing me until I found my balance again. We made camp after only 4 hours, both of us exhausted. "At this rate, it'll take us 3 days, Grace said, stirring our meager dinner over a small fire. "Then it takes 3 days. I accepted the tin cup she handed me. No point worrying about it. She wanted to argue. I could see it in her face, but she also knew I was right. We were committed now. The only way out was forward. That night, sleeping under a rocky overhang with the wind howling outside, Grace curled against my good side. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Everything. The descent. Facing Marcus. What happens after?" She paused. "What if the marshal doesn't believe us? What if Marcus has already paid him off? Then we go higher. Federal authorities, newspapers, someone who can't be bought. And if they're all bought, they're not. Evil has limits, Grace. It's not all powerful." I stroked her hair. "And you're not powerless anymore. You've got evidence, allies, and you survived a mountain winter that should have killed you. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yeah, it does." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "What happens to us after this is done?" "What do you want to happen?" "I want," she hesitated, "I want to rebuild the cabin, properly this time. I want to plant a garden in the spring, learn to can vegetables and make preserves. I want to spend winters by the fire with you and summers working outside, and I want to stop running, stop being afraid, just live." My throat tightened. "That sounds perfect." "You mean it?" "Every word." I paused. "Even the garden part, because I'm going to want a big garden. Carrots, potatoes, maybe even strawberries if they'll grow at altitude." She laughed, soft, surprised. "You're serious about the strawberries?" "Completely serious." She kissed me, gentle, full of promise. "Then let's make sure we survive long enough to plant them." We reached Iron Creek late on the 3rd day. I was barely standing, leg throbbing with every heartbeat, vision swimming from pain and exhaustion. Callahan saw us coming and hurried out of the trading post. "Jesus, Morgan, what happened to you?" "Long story. I need a doctor." "We don't have one. Closest is 2 towns over. Then someone who can stitch and bandage, and we need a place to stay." Callahan studied us both, my blood-stained leg, Grace's exhausted face, the grim determination in both our expressions. "You two look like you fought a war." "We did," Grace said, "and we won." Something in her voice made Callahan take a step back. Then he nodded. "There's a woman, Martha Hayes. Used to be a field nurse before she came west. She can patch you up, and I've got a room upstairs you can use. Not much, but it's warm and dry." "That'll work, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. There's been talk in town. Men asking questions about you, about her." "What kind of talk?" "The kind that says whatever trouble you're in, it's not over." "We know," I said. "That's why we're here." They got me upstairs and into a bed that felt like heaven after days on the ground. Martha Hayes arrived within the hour, a stern woman in her 50s with capable hands and a no-nonsense demeanor. She took one look at my leg and whistled low. "This is infected badly. You're lucky you can still walk." "Can you fix it?" "I can try, but it's going to hurt, and you're going to need to stay off it for at least 2 weeks, maybe more." "I don't have 2 weeks." "Then you'll lose the leg. Your choice." I looked at Grace. She nodded. "Fix it," I said. What followed was the worst hour of my life. Martha cleaned the wound, scraping out infected tissue, burning away dead flesh with a heated knife. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they'd crack, but I didn't scream. Didn't want to scare Grace, who sat beside me, gripping my hand hard enough to leave marks. Finally, Martha finished stitching and bandaging. "That's the best I can do. Keep it clean, keep it elevated, and for the love of everything, stay in bed. You walk on this before it heals properly, you'll open it right back up." "Understood." Martha turned to Grace. "You look like death yourself. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" "I don't remember." "I'll have Callahan send up food." "You eat it. All of it. Can't take care of him if you collapse." After Martha left, Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm tired. So tired I can barely think straight." She rubbed her face. "But we're here. We made it down. That's something. More than something. That's everything. Food arrived. Actual cooked food, hot and plentiful." Grace ate mechanically at first, then with growing hunger as her body remembered what it needed. I managed a few bites before exhaustion won, and I fell into deep, dreamless sleep. I woke the next morning to find Grace gone. Panic hit me first, then I saw the note on the bedside table. "Getting information. Back soon. Don't you dare get out of that bed." An hour later she returned with Callahan. "The territorial marshal is in town," she said without preamble. "3 buildings down. Been here 2 days investigating some mining claim dispute." I pushed myself upright, ignoring the protest from my leg. "Then we talked to him today." "You can barely sit up." "Don't need to sit up to talk." Callahan cleared his throat. "If you want, I can bring him here. Tell him you've got information about a criminal matter. He'll come." "Do it." Callahan left. Grace moved to my side. "You're sure about this? Once we tell him, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "Are you?" She pulled out the journal, holding it like a weapon. "I've been carrying this fear for 4 years. I'm ready to put it down." "Then let's put it down." Marshal Thomas Garrett arrived an hour later, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a badge that had seen better days. He carried himself like someone who'd dealt with every kind of trouble the frontier could throw at him and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Mr. Morgan, ma'am." He tipped his hat to Grace. "I'm told you have information." "We do," I said. "You might want to sit down. This is going to take a while." Garrett sat, pulling out a small notebook. "I'm listening." Grace took a breath. Then she told him everything. Her marriage to Marcus Hartley, the abuse, the discovery of his illegal activities, her escape, the journal she'd compiled, the men he'd sent to kill her, the attack on the mountain. She spoke steadily, without emotion, laying out facts like evidence in a court case, which I realized it would be. Garrett listened without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When Grace finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "May I see the journal?" Grace hesitated only briefly before handing it over. Garrett opened it, read carefully. His eyebrows rose as he turned pages. His jaw tightened. Finally he looked up. "If even half of this is true, Marcus Hartley is one of the most corrupt men I've ever encountered. Smuggling, bribery, extortion, fraud." He shook his head. "And you documented all of it." "I did." "Why?" "Because I needed proof. I needed something that would make people listen, that would make them believe me when I said what kind of man he was." Her voice hardened. "Women like me, we get called liars. Hysterics, troublemakers, but evidence? Evidence doesn't lie." "No, it doesn't." Garrett closed the journal. "I'm going to need to verify this information, cross-reference it with other records. Interview witnesses, if any are still alive. How long will that take?" "Months, maybe longer. Hartley has connections, money, lawyers. Building a case that will actually stick is going to take time. We don't have months, I interrupted. He'll send more men. Then I'll provide protection, put you both somewhere safe while— No. Grace's voice was flat. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not letting him control my life even one more day. Garrett studied her. Mrs. Hartley, it's Morgan now, legally and in every way that matters. Mrs. Morgan, then, I understand your frustration, but these things take time, due process, evidence chains, proper procedure. I've given you everything you need: names, dates, transactions, witnesses who were involved. That journal contains enough evidence to hang him 10 times over. What more do you need? Your testimony in court, under oath. Fine. When? After we build the case. After we ensure it's airtight. And in the meantime, what? We just wait for him to finish what his hired guns started? Garrett's expression softened slightly. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but if we move too fast, if we make mistakes, he walks. And men like Hartley, they don't give you a second chance. We get one shot at this. It has to be perfect. Grace looked at me. I nodded. How long? She asked Garrett. Realistically. 6 months? Maybe 8? And during that time? During that time, you stay out of sight. Let me do my job. Let the law work. The law hasn't worked for me so far. Then give it a chance to start. There was a long silence. Finally, Grace nodded. 6 months. But after that, with or without your perfect case, I'm testifying. I'm standing up in court and telling everyone what he did. Understood? Understood. Garrett stood, tucking the journal into his coat. I'll send a telegram today. Get this started. In the meantime, stay here. Don't talk to anyone about this. And if anyone comes asking questions, we know how to handle trouble, I said. I'm sure you do, but try not to kill anyone else if you can help it. Makes the paperwork difficult. After Garrett left, Grace sat heavily on the bed. 6 months, she said. Half a year of waiting. Could be worse. Could be never. I know, I want this over. I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop being Grace Hartley and just be me. I pulled her close. You will. And in the meantime, we rest. We heal. We get strong again. And then? Then we go back up the mountain and rebuild everything we lost. She looked at me. You still want to go back? After everything? That's our home, Grace, our place. Some bastards burned down our cabin, but they didn't take the land, didn't take the mountain, and they sure as hell didn't take us. My voice was firm. So yeah, we go back, we rebuild, and we make it better than before. A smile broke across her face, the first real smile I'd seen in days. Better than before. I like that. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. I can think of worse things to be stuck with. We spent the next 2 weeks in Iron Creek while I healed. Martha Hayes came by daily to check my progress, and slowly, painfully, the wound began to close properly. During that time, word spread through town about what had happened on the mountain. The story got embellished with each telling. 7 men became 10, then 12. The firefight became an epic siege. My injury became a near-death experience where Grace performed emergency surgery with a hunting knife. Some of it was true. Most wasn't. But the core message got through. Caleb Morgan and his wife had survived something that should have killed them, and they weren't people to mess with. The townsfolk's attitude toward Grace shifted noticeably. The woman they'd written off as doomed now got nods of respect. People made way for her on the street. When she bought supplies, shopkeepers gave her fair prices without argument. She'd earned her place through blood and survival, and everyone knew it. On the 15th day, Martha declared me fit enough to travel. The leg's healing well. You'll have a scar, and it might ache when weather changes, but you'll walk fine. She fixed me with a stern look. Don't be stupid with it. No running. No climbing. Nothing strenuous for another month at least. Understood? I believe you. I mean it, Morgan. You push too hard, you'll regret it. After Martha left, I stood carefully, testing my weight. The leg held, still hurt, but manageable. Grace watched from the doorway. Ready to go home? More than ready. We gathered our limited supplies, mostly purchased from Callahan, on credit to be paid back later, and started the climb. It took us 3 days this time, moving slow and careful, but when we finally crested the ridge and saw the clearing where our cabin had stood, Grace stopped. The burned timbers were still there, black and skeletal against the snow. The stone chimney stood alone, a monument to what we'd lost. "It looks worse than I remembered," she said quietly. "Then we'll make it better." We walked to the ruins together, surveying the damage. Most of the structure was gone, but the foundation was solid. And the cache still held tools, supplies, enough to start rebuilding. I knelt by the ashes, running my hands through them, found a twisted piece of metal. The coffee pot I'd used every morning for 4 years, warped and blackened, but still recognizable. I held it up to Grace. "Salvage," she laughed, surprised. "You're going to keep that?" "Damn right. It survived, just like us." Over the next weeks, we began the work of rebuilding. Not quickly. My leg couldn't handle heavy labor yet. But steadily, one log at a time, one wall, one room. Grace proved to be surprisingly good at construction. She had an eye for angles, for how pieces fit together. And the strength she'd built over months of hard work served her well. We worked side by side, talking through plans, adjusting designs, building something better than what we'd had before. The new cabin took shape slowly, bigger than the first, sturdier, with proper windows and a sleeping loft, and enough space to move without bumping into each other. It wasn't finished yet, wouldn't be for months, but it was ours. One evening, as we sat outside watching the sunset, Grace leaned against my shoulder. "Do you think he knows yet? Marcus?" "Probably. Garrett would have started interviewing witnesses by now. Word gets around. So he knows I'm alive, knows I'm coming for him." "Good." Her voice was hard. "I want him to know. I want him to spend every day wondering when the hammer's going to fall. Let him feel what I felt for 4 years." I didn't answer, just held her while the sun sank below the ridge, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Winter was ending, spring was coming, and with it, justice. The telegram arrived in late May, carried up the mountain by a rider from Iron Creek who looked half dead from the climb. Grace read it twice, hands shaking. "Case ready. Trial set June 15th. Your testimony required, Marshal Garrett." She looked up at me. "It's time." I nodded. 3 weeks. That wasn't much notice. "We finished the roof this week," I said. "Get it weather tight before we have to leave." We worked long hours to complete the cabin. The roof went up, solid and strong. Not perfect, but good enough to come home to. On June 1st, we started down the mountain for what we both knew might be the last time. If the trial went badly, if Marcus walked free, or worse, if he had us killed before we could testify, this mountain would just be a memory. But if it went right, if justice actually worked the way it was supposed to, we could come back and finish building our life. The stakes had never been higher. Iron Creek was busier than we'd ever seen it. Apparently, word had spread about the trial. A wealthy merchant being brought down by his runaway wife made for good gossip. And people were traveling from 3 territories over to watch it happen. Callahan met us at the trading post, his expression grim. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," he said. "Hartley's lawyers have been through here twice already, asking questions, trying to find dirt on both of you." "Did they find any?" I asked. "Nothing that'll matter in court, but they're not done trying." He lowered his voice. "And there's been other men, not lawyers, watching the roads, asking about your movements. I'd be real careful if I were you." "We're always careful," Grace said. But her hand moved to the revolver at her hip. She wore it openly now, and nobody questioned it. Marshal Garrett had arranged for us to stay in a boarding house 2 towns over, away from the main trial location. Safer that way, he'd explained in a previous telegram. Harder for Hartley's people to get to you. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who asked no questions and cooked meals that made Grace want to weep after months of our own rough cooking. She showed us to a small room on the 2nd floor with a window that overlooked the street. "Marshal's orders," Mrs. Chen said. "Nobody comes up here without my say-so, and I sleep light." "Thank you," Grace said. "Don't thank me. Just testify true and put that bastard away." Mrs. Chen's eyes were hard. "I knew a girl once, married to a man like your husband. She didn't survive him. So you go in there and you make sure he pays." After she left, Grace sat on the bed staring at her hands. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of what specifically?" "Of seeing him again. Of having to stand in a room and look at his face and tell strangers what he did to me." Her voice shook. "Of not being believed. Of all this being for nothing. You'll be believed. How can you be sure? Because you have evidence. Because you have witnesses. Because Garrett spent 6 months building a case that's airtight." I took her hand. "And because you're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived him once. You can survive facing him in court. What if I freeze? What if I get up there and can't speak? Then you take a breath. Look at me in the gallery and remember who you are now. Not the woman he married. Not the woman who ran. The woman who climbed a mountain, survived a siege, rebuilt a life from ashes." My voice was firm. "That woman can do anything." She leaned against me, drawing strength from my presence. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. If this goes wrong, if he walks, or if something happens to me, promise you'll take that journal and make sure it gets published. Every newspaper, every authority, everyone who needs to know what kind of man he is. Grace, promise me." "I promise, but it's not going to come to that." "You don't know that?" "No, but I believe it anyway." The trial was set to begin in the Territorial Courthouse, a surprisingly grand building for such a rough region, with actual columns and a proper courtroom that could seat 100 people. It was packed. Grace and I arrived early, escorted by 2 deputies Garrett had assigned for security. The crowd parted for us, whispers following in our wake. Then I saw him. Marcus Hartley sat at the defense table, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers in suits that probably cost more than most people in this territory made in a year. He looked exactly as Grace had described, handsome in a cold way, dark hair graying at the temples, eyes like chips of ice. When he saw Grace, he smiled, not warmly, not kindly, like a predator recognizing prey it thought had escaped. Grace's steps faltered. My hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "Keep walking. Don't give him the satisfaction." She forced herself forward, chin up, meeting Marcus's gaze without flinching. His smile faded. "Good." The prosecution was led by a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Wells, who'd made a name for herself taking down corrupt officials and had jumped at the chance to prosecute this case. She met with Grace briefly before the trial began. "I've reviewed your journal," Wells said. "It's damning. But I need you to understand, the defense is going to attack your character. They're going to paint you as a liar, a thief, an unstable woman who fabricated evidence out of spite." "I know. They're going to bring up your weight, your appearance, suggest that Marcus was disgusted by you, and that's why you invented these accusations." Grace's jaw tightened. "Let them. They're going to make this ugly." "I've survived ugly before." Wells studied her, then nodded. "Good. Because we're going to need that strength. Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 4 years." The trial opened with Wells laying out the charges: fraud, smuggling, bribery, extortion, conspiracy, a litany of crimes that had the gallery murmuring. The defense objected to nearly everything, trying to get evidence thrown out on technicalities. But the judge, a weathered man named Patterson, who looked like he'd seen every kind of legal maneuvering and wasn't impressed, shut them down. "The evidence stands," he said. "Proceed, Ms. Wells." The first day was mostly procedural. Wells called witnesses who could verify the journal's contents, a clerk who'd handled some of the illegal shipments, a former business partner who'd been forced out when he refused to participate in the fraud, a customs official who'd been bribed to look the other way. Each one testified carefully, corroborating specific entries in Grace's documentation. Marcus sat through it all with a neutral expression, occasionally whispering to his lawyers, but showing no emotion. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed against the table. He was rattled, even if he wouldn't show it. On the second day, Wells called Grace to the stand. The walk to the witness box felt like miles. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their doubt. She sat down, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Wells approached gently. "Please state your name for the record." "Grace Morgan, formerly Grace Hartley." "And how do you know the defendant?" "He was my husband for 4 years." "Can you describe the nature of your marriage?" Grace took a breath. This was it. No more hiding. "It was a prison," she said quietly. "From the day we married, Marcus controlled every aspect of my life. Where I went, who I spoke to, what I wore, what I ate. He monitored my correspondence, my friendships, my every movement." "Did he physically harm you?" "Yes. When I displeased him, which was often, a slap here, a shove there. Nothing that would leave marks people could see." Her voice steadied. "He was very careful about that." Marcus's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, this is hearsay and character assassination with no evidence." "Your Honor," Wells said calmly, "Mrs. Morgan is testifying to her own experiences." "That's not hearsay." "Overruled." "Continue, Ms. Wells." And Grace told her story. All of it. The truth she'd carried in silence for 4 years. The courtroom listened in absolute silence. And I watched Marcus's mask finally begin to crack. The trial continued for 3 more days. Wells called witness after witness, each one corroborating entries in Grace's journal. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, building a wall of testimony that Marcus's lawyers couldn't tear down no matter how hard they tried. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman stood up from the gallery. She was small, frail, with white hair pulled back in a tight bun and hands that trembled as she gripped the pew in front of her. "I have something to say," she announced, her voice cracking but determined. The judge looked up, startled. "Ma'am, this is highly irregular. You can't just—" "My name is Miriam Cross," the woman continued, ignoring him. "I was employed by Marcus Hartley for 6 years, from 1879 to 1885. I was his housekeeper." The courtroom went silent. Marcus's face went white. "Your Honor," his lead attorney jumped to his feet, "this woman has not been called as a witness. She has not been sworn in. This is—" "Let her speak," Judge Patterson said quietly. Something in the old woman's eyes had caught his attention, the look of someone who'd carried a terrible secret too long. Miriam walked slowly to the witness stand. Her legs shook, but she made it. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Wells approached carefully. "Mrs. Cross, you said you worked for Mr. Hartley. In what capacity?" "I kept his house, cooked his meals, cleaned his rooms." Miriam's voice grew stronger. "And I witnessed things, terrible things." "Can you be more specific? I saw how he treated his first wife. Charlotte was her name. Sweet girl, barely 20 when they married." Miriam looked directly at Marcus. "He broke her, just like he tried to break this one." Grace's breath caught. "Mrs. Cross," Wells said gently, "what happened to Charlotte Hartley?" "He killed her." The words dropped like stones into still water. "Not with his hands. He was too clever for that. But I saw him, one night in 1884. I came down to the kitchen late, couldn't sleep, and I saw him pour something into her tea, something from a little brown bottle he kept hidden in his study." Marcus shot to his feet. "That's a lie. This woman is senile, delusional." "Sit down, Mr. Hartley," Judge Patterson said sharply. "Charlotte died 3 days later," Miriam continued. "The doctor said it was her heart. She was only 24 years old. And I said nothing. I was too afraid, too ashamed. I've lived with that silence for 12 years, she turned to Grace. But I won't be silent anymore, not when I can stop him from doing it again." The courtroom erupted. Marcus's lawyers were shouting objections. The gallery was buzzing with shocked whispers. The judge was banging his gavel, calling for order. Through it all, Grace sat perfectly still, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't been the first, and if Marcus had his way, she wouldn't have been the last. Wells called for a recess to investigate Miriam's claims. Marshal Garrett immediately began looking into Charlotte Hartley's death, pulling records, interviewing people who'd known her. During the break, I found Grace standing outside the courthouse, staring at nothing. "You all right?" I asked. "He killed his first wife." Her voice was hollow. "And no one stopped him. No one even questioned it." "They're questioning it now." "Because Miriam found her courage, 12 years later." Grace turned to look at me. "How many other women did he hurt in between? How many other Charlottes and Graces who didn't survive?" I didn't have an answer for that. She wiped her eyes. "I'm going back in there. I'm going to finish this." "I know you are." The trial resumed the next morning. Wells had worked through the night, and she opened with new evidence. Records showing Charlotte Hartley's death had indeed been suspicious. A servant who remembered Marcus purchasing rat poison the week before Charlotte died. A pharmacist who recalled selling him arsenic for pest control. The defense fought hard, but they were losing ground. Finally, on the afternoon of the 5th day, both sides rested their cases. Closing arguments began. Marcus's lead attorney painted him as a successful businessman, victimized by a vindictive wife and a confused old woman. He emphasized the lack of physical proof, the reliance on testimony, the possibility that everyone was mistaken or lying. Then Wells stood. She was magnificent. She took the jury through every piece of evidence, showing how it all connected. How witness after witness had confirmed Grace's documentation. How Miriam's testimony explained why Marcus was so desperate to get Grace back, to silence her before she could expose him the way Charlotte never could. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wells said, her voice ringing through the courtroom, "Marcus Hartley is a man who believes he is above the law, above consequence, above basic human decency. He married 2 women, he abused both, he killed one, and he would have killed the second if she hadn't been brave enough, strong enough to escape." She paused, looking at each juror. Grace Morgan didn't ask to be in this position. She didn't want to spend years afraid, running, hiding. She wanted a normal life. But her husband took that from her, took her freedom, her dignity, her sense of safety, and when she finally found the courage to leave, he sent armed men to murder her rather than let her live free. Wells's voice hardened. "That is who Marcus Hartley is, a man who would rather kill his wife than face consequences for his actions. Don't let him win. Don't let him walk out of here free to hurt more people. Find him guilty. Give Mrs. Morgan the justice she's earned. Give Charlotte Hartley the justice she was denied." She sat down. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Grace and I waited in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, unable to eat, unable to relax, just waiting. "What if they don't believe me?" Grace whispered. "They will. You can't know that. I know you. I know what you survived. I know truth when I hear it." I took her hand. "The jury will too." When the bailiff finally came to bring us back, Grace's heart was hammering so hard I could see her pulse in her throat. The courtroom was packed again. Marcus sat at his table, expression carefully neutral, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew. The jury filed in, faces serious. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Patterson asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." Grace's breath caught. "On the charge of smuggling?" "Guilty." "On the charge of bribery?" "Guilty." Charge after charge, guilty, guilty, guilty. 17 counts in total. Marcus's composure cracked. His lawyers were already whispering urgently about appeals, about technicalities, about anything that might save him. But it didn't matter. He'd been found guilty. In front of a packed courtroom. In front of the people he thought he controlled. He'd been exposed and convicted. Grace felt tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears, relief. Release. It was over. Judge Patterson spoke over the noise. "Marcus Hartley, you have been found guilty on 17 counts of fraud, smuggling, bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. In light of Mrs. Cross's testimony, I am also ordering a full investigation into the death of Charlotte Hartley. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, you are remanded to custody without bail. Bailiff, take him into custody." As they led Marcus away in chains, he looked at Grace one last time, not with hatred, not with anger, with disbelief. He'd never thought she'd win, never thought the soft, frightened woman he'd married could possibly destroy him. He'd been wrong. Outside the courthouse, Grace collapsed against me, sobbing. "It's done," she gasped. "It's really done. It's done. You won. We won." She held on to me while she cried out 4 years of fear and pain and rage. People walked past, some stopping to congratulate her, others just watching. Marshal Garrett approached, tipping his hat. "Well done, Mrs. Morgan. That took real courage. Thank you for everything." "Just doing my job. Though I'll admit I've never seen anyone document evidence quite like you did. You should consider law enforcement as a career." That got a watery laugh from Grace. "I think I'm done with crime, on both sides." "Fair enough. What will you do now?" She looked at me. "We're going home." 2 weeks later, we attended the sentencing. Marcus Hartley was given 20 years in a territorial prison with no possibility of parole. His assets were seized to compensate his victims. His business empire collapsed within days. The investigation into Charlotte's death was ongoing, but everyone knew what they'd find. Marcus was escorted out of the courtroom a broken man. Grace felt nothing watching him go, not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness where the fear used to be. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" she asked me as we left the courthouse for the last time. "Like what?" "Like nothing. I thought I'd feel triumphant, or at least relieved, but I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been fighting for so long your body doesn't know how to stop." I squeezed her hand. "Give it time. The relief will come." We stayed in town another week, tying up loose ends. Grace met with Wells to discuss civil suits against some of Marcus's associates, gave interviews to newspapers that wanted to write about the case, even received a letter from a women's group asking if she'd speak about her experience. She declined. She'd told her story once, under oath. That was enough. What she wanted now was to go home and live quietly. The climb back up the mountain felt different this time, lighter somehow, like she was shedding weight with each step. When we finally reached the clearing, the half-finished cabin stood waiting. "Ready to finish what we started?" I asked. "More than ready." We worked through the summer, completing the cabin properly. Grace planted her garden, not just practical vegetables, but flowers too. Bright splashes of color against the mountain browns and greens. She learned to preserve food, to make jam, to can vegetables for winter. I built furniture, carved decorations, made our home beautiful as well as functional. By autumn, the cabin was complete. 2 rooms, a sleeping loft, real glass windows, a porch where we could sit and watch the sunset over the valley. It was perfect. 1 year later, on a crisp October morning, Grace stood before a simple headstone in the Iron Creek Cemetery. Thomas Hartley Hunter, 1830 to 1883, beloved father. She knelt down, placed a hand on the weathered stone. In her other hand, she held the rifle, the one her father had taught her to use when she was 8 years old, the one that had saved her life on a snow-covered mountain. "Bah," she whispered. The old word felt strange on her tongue after so many years of speaking only English. I found it, not the strength you taught me, but the strength I always had, the strength no one let me use. She placed the rifle gently against the headstone. "I don't need this anymore, not like I did. But I wanted you to know I remembered. Everything you taught me about being strong, about not giving up, about fighting for what matters." Footsteps crunched in the grass behind her. She turned to see me approaching, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Our daughter, 3 months old, born in the spring on a mountain where everyone said Grace wouldn't last a week. "She woke up," I said softly, kneeling beside Grace. "I think she wanted to meet her grandfather." Grace took the baby, cradling her close. The infant had dark hair like her mother, but her eyes were the same pale blue as mine. "Her name is Charlotte," Grace said to the headstone. "Charlotte Emma Morgan, after your grandmother, and after a woman I never met, but whose story gave me courage." She paused, tears sliding down her cheeks. "She'll know her grandfather through stories, through the things you taught me, and she'll grow up knowing that strength comes in all forms. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing what's right anyway." I wrapped my arm around Grace's shoulders, the three of us together in the quiet morning. "You did good," I murmured. He'd be proud. I hope so. We sat there for a long time, our small family gathered around the memory of a man who'd taught his daughter to survive, never knowing how much she'd need those lessons. Finally, Grace stood, still holding Charlotte close. "Ready to go home?" I asked. She looked at the rifle leaning against her father's grave, then at the baby in her arms, then at me. "Yes," she said, "let's go home." We walked back through Iron Creek, past the courthouse where justice had finally been served, past the trading post where Callahan waved from the doorway, past the spot where Grace had first stepped off that stagecoach, and into a life she couldn't have imagined. The trail up the mountain was familiar now. Grace climbed it easily, even carrying the baby,